All right. Howdy, gang. Hey. Oh, my gosh. It's awesome to be here with you. Apparently, I did not know this, but apparently I have some sort of slight credibility in the Raleigh-Durham area. So my wife, Geraldine, and I might have mentioned this, or some of you might have seen it, visited the Duke Lemur Center just a few hours ago, and somehow snuck into the tour. We called this morning and got a call back, and they were like, yeah, we can sneak you in. We have like 2 slots at 2:30 p.m. And wow, what a great experience. Just amazing. You all have a beautiful, beautiful area of the country. We've never been here before, so it was really fun to see. So today we've got a lot of material to cover. You know, I want to spend some time going through some of the research and studies that we've done, and then show you some interesting data from that and some takeaway tactics. What I really am hoping that you'll do, though, especially because we have, kind of this small, intimate group of us, all deeply interested in these same topics, I'm really hoping that you will interrupt me with questions. Anytime you've got them during the presentation, you think of something, you're like, wait, does that make sense? How does you apply that? Wait, I had this problem. What does Rand think of that? Please, raise your hand. I will call on you as soon as I'm finished with that sentence, and then we can dive in from there. The other thing I like to do, as always, you can find all the slides there. It's bit.ly/rank slides 2015. I know it's a little bit longer one, but rank slides 2015. And you can get all the URLs I'm going to share, all the images, all the graphics, that kind of stuff too. So, cool. Let's begin. I got to point this way. All right, so you are probably familiar with something that we do at Moz called the Ranking Factors Study. We do this every 2 years, so biennially. I think our first one was 2005, so this is actually our 10th year that we have done it in, but the 5th time. And we do 2 things. We survey a group of professional SEOs. I think probably a few people in this group, certainly I know some folks from Adapt Partners and a couple others contributed to that survey. And then we also do a correlation analysis study, which I'll talk about in a sec too. But from these, we get some really interesting takeaways, and then I'll show you some cool stuff that we've learned along the way from that as well. But I figured we'd start by taking this broad look at what 150 professional SEOs on average think about Google's ranking algorithm and how it's changed over time. I actually find that to be fascinating. So this is 2013, right, where you'd show these kind of graphics where we'd have this pie chart view. And there's one problem with this. I get a little frustrated with myself for using a pie chart for this. The challenge with a pie chart is you get this wrong-headed idea when you present it in this fashion that, for example, if I were to get more page-level link features, like lots more links pointing at my page, or lots more links pointing at my domain, or I were to improve my content even more, that there's some maximum, right, that I can't go any further. And that's the wrong impression to try and get. There's not really 100% of the given ranking algorithm for any particular search result that you might be competing on. So that's the wrong way to think about it. And as a result, what I want to try and do in the future is illustrate things a little more like this, where basically you get this relative sense. The other thing I like about this is you can see, I mean, this is a theme you're going to feel, but do you see how flat, relatively flat this is? Like if you look at the smallest one on the rankings list in 2015, this is the actual 2015 data, we're looking at 3.98, which is only about half of what people think the very strongest factor is. I find that fascinating. One of the other, bunch of interesting things to note, but page level social, obviously Google says this is not a ranking factor at all, at least not directly. I have my own personal opinions. I actually believe them. I think this is one of those times where a lot of social data is correlated with, but not the cause of many rankings, at least not directly. Okay, let's talk about what's happened over time. Because this is, I think, deeply fascinating and probably speaks to what the future of SEO looks like more so than any single factor. So we have here, I've got 2009, 2011, and 2013, and you get this sense that like the things that were not important at all years ago are becoming more important, and the things that were like dominating the algorithm, right? This was links, right? Links to a page and links to a domain, back in the day. Those have actually kind of shrunk. They've gotten smaller over time. This is 2015 in the pie chart format, just for consistency's sake. I know, I said I wouldn't do it, and then here I am doing it. It was hard to convert all the others. So, this kind of gives you this sense that, man, that algorithm is really, it feels to SEOs like two things are happening. One, the factors are becoming flatter. They're becoming more and more, it's becoming harder and harder to influence rankings by just pounding on one signal, right? It used to be back in the day, you get a page ranking number 25, and you go, okay, let's go to work and let's hammer some links with anchor text at that URL until we get to page 1. And that doesn't really feel like how it is, at least to the professional SEOs in our survey, anymore. So that, I think this sort of visual shows it off kind of nicely, that you get that flattening. Yeah, hey. Please. Thank you. Got to do a 360 for it, though.
I'll do it again. So do you think, it's probably pretty obvious, that the reason it's shrinking like that is because back in 2009, it was actually really easy to have rankings be associated with links because it was really easy to show that. And now it's really difficult for to see social influencing and stuff like that, what's gamed, what's not. They're just getting better, right?
I think that the two things are going on here. I think one thing that's happening for sure is Google's gotten way better at fighting manipulative forms of SEO. So both on the keyword and content side and for sure on the link building side. And because of that, a lot of us feel like, man, I can't just pound links at something and get it to rank like I used to. And then I think the second thing is we have all seen the sophistication of the algorithm grow, right? Their ability to look at intent in search results, and I'll show a few examples of that. Their ability to get a greater and greater sense of whether the content matches not just the keywords, but the topics that you're searching on, right? So they're ranking things for queries. I showed one at Internet Summit this week for best beef in Seattle, right? And for best beef in Seattle, 5 years ago, you would have expected and probably been right that it would have been a bunch of pages that had best and beef and Seattle in the title. You could almost count on it in at least 5 of those top 10. And now here's a list of butcher shops, here's some steakhouses, and you're like, man, I didn't search for butcher shops or steakhouses. How do they know that those things are beef? How do they know that that's associated with the adjective best? And I think it's those types of sophistications that we can all see and feel in the algorithm that's going on. And then the last one, which I will mention briefly, is engagement data. I'll show that in a sec, but engagement data, I think, is on the rise. We can all feel it. We see it in our results, and when it's gone, we don't. Is that answer? Yeah? Good? All right. Cool. Okay. So, a couple of opinions that I thought particularly stood out and that I thought would be relevant for you folks. So, domain-level link features, right? Let's look at their quick evolution over time. You get this sense, pardon my percentage sign there, you get this sense, right? That's kind of going down over time. Page level link features, also see that same drop. Page level keyword features, you get the sense that everybody's getting to 14%. It's just all 14%. Everybody kind of ends up there. And some of the signals, are on the rise and in the 7, 8, 9, 10% range. So interesting. Ooh, nice and dark. So, my sense, professional SEOs feel like the algo's flattening. This presentation was created in PowerPoint, but we're using an open source piece of software right now, which could contribute to a little funniness. Should be fine. Second thing, I think after years of dominating the algorithm, dominating, just overwhelming, links, don't get me wrong, they are still powerful. If you were to ask me the question, Rand, do links still move the needle? They absolutely do. for sure, we've run a bunch of tests. I'm part of this testing group called IMEC Labs that Eric Engie from Stone Temple Consulting out in Boston and Mark Traphagen, who's here in the Raleigh area but couldn't be with us tonight. He's part of that group too, and Cyrus from Oz. And so, we look at a lot of different things, and we pointed links at pages this year, last year, and see the same kind of thing, right? You point links at something, it moves up in rankings. So it is not the case that links are gone, they're just not as dominant. And then the third one, like I said, engagement data, that is clearly on the rise. How many of you were at Internet Summit this week? Cool. All right, so you guys probably participated in that test that we ran. The keyword for that test was find any email address. So for those of you who weren't there, basically, Internet Summit, quite big, lots of people. I have no idea why they invited me and Russell Simmons to be keynotes. I was mentioning some of the guys, yeah, let's ask Rand, and then one of the most successful entrepreneurs of this decade and the last one, and see, maybe they'll show up. And I was like, yeah, I'm so there. But so, there's like 2,500 people in the audience. I ask folks to pull out their phones and do this search for find any email address. And then I asked them, hey, would you click on the first result, which is findanyemail.net, something like that. It was one of those, I tried it. For the 5 emails I tried, they didn't pull back any one. Like they were unable to find any of them. And then ranking on the top of page 2 was this other site called Voila Norbert. And I had people essentially bounce off of the first one, click to the second page, click on the first one, click on Voila Norbert, stay there. And we saw that rise as high as number 5 about 12 hours later. So you can feel that engagement data pretty quick. I think it's fallen back down now. If you check on your phones, it probably fell back down. I was seeing it fall back down. Some folks were tweeting it earlier today and they were still seeing it at number 1. I'm not sure if that's personalization, but regardless, this engagement data stuff is big. Like imagine if you could have a consistent showing in Google's rankings where you're ranking number 7, but you're earning clicks like you're number 4 or number 5, you're probably going to move up quite quickly, right? If you are the sexiest one on that page and people click to you and they stay on your site and they don't want to leave and they don't bounce back to the search results, you're probably in for a really good time. Like you have probably done some very nice SEO. I think that changes the competitive landscape. Makes for a big thing. Okay, so I am gonna, along with that survey data, I wanted to cover some correlation data. Very important to remember, correlation doesn't imply causation, although the end of that quote, which it is often quoted to me, is, but it sure is a hint. And I think that's true in a lot of these cases as well. It sure is a hint. It's an interesting hint. Not necessarily that it implies, but. So why are we still talking about this? Well, all right, correlation data does not tell us why this page outranks this other page. That's not what it's there to do. It doesn't say that. It does say what features, on average, across thousands and thousands of search results, do these pages tend to have that these pages don't tend to have. I find that fascinating, right? That, to me, is uniquely interesting information even on its own. Not just necessarily because of, well, you can't say that tweets influence search results because we point a bunch of tweets at something and it doesn't move up. I agree with you. However, I think it's still interesting that tweets correlate well with higher search results. I find that fascinating. That must mean there's probably a relationship. Not that it always implies, right? Maybe something that has more cat pictures on it, ranks higher on average. Well, maybe that's just coincidence. But in a lot of these cases, it's a hint. It's a hint. So there's 3, well, all right, this is about to get interesting. There's 3 useful applications for this. One, we can debunk statements about what's not necessarily causal in rankings. Second thing, we can show relative potential influence. So if you say, I think X has a higher influence on average than Y, you can look at that. And then we can also identify factors that we might want to do real tests on, right? That we might want to go run through and say, hey, let's put this into IMEC Labs, let's try it out. So I have a quick question. Patrick and Robert, did you guys run through this presentation before I got here today? No. Well, so you know how, have you ever been to Seattle? Any of you ever been to Seattle? You know how we're really weird? Like we legalize marijuana and we're like, come on, all the Syrian refugees, we want you. Like we're that kind of a town, right? We're like, everybody has to get gay married. Like you just have to. It's part of the, we want to live there, you get a little bit, right? Like once at least. So like, this next part of the presentation, I'm going to show you that I'm from Seattle, because we're going to have this guy help us do some debunking. So yeah, please forgive I don't do a lot of presentations in this geography. I don't know. It's just, you forgive me. So okay, all right, here we go. Google. I'll do my worst Donald Trump. Google loses. Right? The more ads you buy, the higher they rank you. Well, the nice thing is we can show the Donald that in fact, right, that one thing that's nice about correlation that we can absolutely do with it is we can say, hey, if something is not causal, if something is correlated well, then if something is causal, it must have some correlation. Right? Like that, it doesn't flow both ways, but if it is causal, it's going to have some correlation. So here we can see, look, this is number of Google AdSense ads, and we actually did this for a bunch of different types of ads, and it has a negative correlation, suggesting that if you have more ads on a page, on average at least, you perform worse in search results. Very slightly worse, like this is a very small number, but we're debunking that idea, right? So if you believe there's some conspiracy where Google wants you to put more ads on there and they want to reward their own ad platform, that kind of thing, what we're saying here is Google does not appear to be doing that. On average, across thousands of search results, that's not the case. Right, so the Donald might say, the best SEOs use multiple repetitions of keywords, right? Like that still totally works. None of this like TF-IDF, latent Dirichlet allocation, fancy topic modeling stuff like that, you know. Donald thinks we're not doing that. Well, okay, you know what? On average, that is totally wrong. Like you can see these are raw keyword matches in the title, which have a very tiny positive correlation. And years ago, this used to be big. It really did. On average, content that does fit better into a topic modeling system, right? Suggesting like way more sophistication from Google. Moz's topic modeling system nowhere near as sophisticated as what Google can do. So when we're trying to measure this, I'm sure we're not getting there, but you get that sense, right? That is outperforming things. Correlation numbers can also lead us to interesting theories. So for example, folks have been asking me this year especially, is partial match anchor text a better idea than exact match anchor text? Right, if let's say I want to rank number one for dental hygienist or dental surgeon Durham, which, that's a pretty money term right there. Should I get links that point to my site, my page that say dental surgeon Durham? Or should I try and get, modified versions of that, like you can find a great dental surgeon in the city of Durham, and that longer piece is, or just Durham dentist, or Durham dental surgery, or these kinds of things, right? Modified versions of that page. Well, what's interesting is partial anchor text for the very first time this year had a higher correlation than exact match. So that led us down that rabbit hole of like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe that is the case, right? Maybe. Well, it turns out, actually, we ran a test. I put on a lab coat and looked like a dork. But we ran some experiments. And in those experiments, what we found is, no, that's not the case. Exact match still moves the needle way more than partial does. My belief is that what that correlation is showing is that a lot of people who get exact match anchor text are coming from places that Google doesn't count anymore, which I think makes a lot of sense, right? Like Google is looking at link sources. They're trying to figure out who's manipulative, who's spammy, who's not. And yeah, it sure looks like a lot of places where you can get and where people are getting and placing exact match anchors are not getting counted as much as by Google. Another thing to note about correlation data, for those of you who, like me, were got D's in statistics. So thankfully, I have a data science team who all got A's. But they, what we would expect in a system that has, according to Google, right, many hundreds of ranking signals, and I think probably in the thousands, to be honest, is that I would expect that we should see single factors, no single factor should be correlating up here. If you saw this type of correlation, that would suggest that that one factor was almost all that mattered, right? That was the only thing in Google's ranking system, and that would be very weird to find. So we're generally looking in these smaller ranges, the high end about 0.4, the low end about negative 0.25. All right. So let's take a look at some of these correlations, see how they do with our rankings. We used a data set from May of 2015. We collected about 16,500 search results. These are all google.com US. And you can see link metrics right there. This is really similar. Like these numbers make me think that while we feel, professional SEOs like us feel like links have become less important, it is not the case that they are less correlated. They are as similarly correlated now as they were 2 years ago and 4 years ago. So that's kind of interesting, right? Google feels like it's a lot more sophisticated. I think it could be just that they're a lot more sophisticated about which links they count, not that links don't count. We also did some cool data, huge shout out to Ahrefs and Majestic, who have both worked with us, right? One of the things I love about the SEO field is while we're competitive with these companies, right? They're our biggest competitors. We all work together. Like there's such an opportunity in our field, and we all care so much about transparency and about making a difference in the industry that we work together. So Moz and Ahrefs are compared in this data set, and you can see very similar, like very, very close in terms of the data. And I'll be totally honest, Ahrefs and Majestic both have bigger indices than Moz does. Majestic's historic is older, their new one tends to be fresher, Ahrefs tends to be fresher as well. So you get this sense like, if you have a substantive subset of a link graph of the web, you see similar link metrics. And that was interesting for us too. Social shares. So this actually correlates pretty nicely to what we saw in the survey and opinion data, which is that social shares are down about 10 to 15% from their high of 2 years ago. And actually, I think a couple of them were even higher 4 years ago. Do you remember 2 years ago, Google Plus was super weirdly high? There was a bunch of blog posts about how it looked like Google Plus activity was responsible, for so much of SEO rankings and all this kind of thing. Clearly, it was in the personalized results. Well, that's fallen quite considerably. We also looked at traffic and engagement. So I mentioned this test that we just did at Internet Summit. What do we think? What do we have, like 150 people or so in here? We could try one maybe later tonight if we feel like we have time. We could give one a shot. So we worked with SimilarWeb. SimilarWeb collects a bunch of data. They have a panel of users. Their data is phenomenal. It's an expensive product. I think it starts at $200 a month. But they have what we've seen to be the most accurate data about traffic. So when we looked across, I did another study as part of IMAC Labs, looked at a bunch of different websites who voluntarily gave me their real web traffic from their analytics. And I looked at SimilarWeb and Alexa and Compete and Quantcast and all these folks, and SimilarWeb came out the best by a good shot. So we worked with them and we asked them for engagement data around the pages that we're ranking. You can see here, I honestly would have expected a little bit higher. I would have expected higher. This is not as substantive as I was thinking it would be. I do think we're looking here at page views, total page views, all page views from any source. I think if we had looked at things like bounce rate and time on site and engagement data around just search visits, we would have seen more and better data. So we're going to try and do that with SimilarWeb or maybe with JumpShot, which is a competitor of theirs, in the near future. We'll see how that goes. Certainly, we can prove to ourselves through these experiments that engagement data does have some impact, at least short term. Keyword use. Well, keyword use is an interesting one. this one, what it really says to me is the more sophisticated we can get, the better our models, the closer we can get to the topic modeling that Google might be doing, the better. The hard thing is, I don't have a great tool for you today to say, hey, go plug your page into this tool, give it this keyword, and it'll spit out all the things that Google is looking for from a keyword topic modeling perspective, right? What are the other words that should be found on the page with what relatives, weights, and how much content are they expecting to see? I want that tool. Like, I desperately want it. I think we all need it. To my mind, it's one of the biggest missing things in the SEO field. Alchemy API and Monkey Learn are both like kind of outside the SEO world, but trying to do this. A few other folks have built internal ones. I think Stone Temple has one. But to my mind, like, this is a huge opportunity. Somebody, if you are great at natural language processing, I think you can make a mint helping SEOs learn how to build their pages. So we also did something unique, something we've never done in the past. We broke down correlations by category of keywords. So I'll show you what I mean there. Basically, we'd take a vertical like health, and we had 1,000 or so keywords in the health vertical. So we looked at them compared to business and industrial keywords, sports and fitness keywords, retailers, general merchandise. And look at this. That's kind of crazy. This is external links on a web page, meaning linking out. So people ask all the time, right? They say, hey, should I be linking out from my site? Will that help me or hurt me if I link to other pages around the web? Well, I mean, the answer is it probably won't hurt you. Almost definitely won't hurt you unless you're linking to spam, and the correlations suggest that. But if you're a restaurant website, that 0.01, like that correlation's almost nothing. But if you're a health website, yeah, you should link out to other studies. You should link out to reference resources. If you're a sports website, you should probably link to the official team pages and bio pages, right? That makes total sense to me. And a lot of our data like this fits in. So I'll talk about this in a sec, but to my mind, we need to start thinking about correlation data as it relates to our set of search results, in addition to the broad set out there. I think this is another cool tool opportunity. Well, all right. This is external exact match anchor text links versus higher rankings. Again, I mean, this is usually one of the things that's most highly correlated, but you can see a pretty big difference between home and garden sites versus travel and tourism or jobs and education, right? That anchor text links doing much better at helping these folks on average, or let's see, not necessarily at helping them, but the ones that do have it tend to rank a lot higher in those verticals. Document length, this one makes total sense to me. Arts and entertainment, news media publications. Have you seen those studies from like BuzzFeed and who's it, Upworthy and Huffington Post, right, where they talk about the longer their content is, the better it tends to do? The more shares and links and all this engagement that it tends to get. Well, guess we saw the same kind of thing on the categories level. But if you have a tiny little restaurant website, doesn't seem to matter much. That doesn't, right? Dining and nightlife, nope, it's fine, you're cool. Got an e-commerce shop? Not as important. Makes sense to me. Social shares. So this is both Twitter. Twitter's the top one in each of these. Facebook's the bottom one in each of these. Pretty similar again, right? Same story here where you're seeing arts, entertainment, and health, and family and community. The types of stuff that gets more shares tends to do better when it sees shares than stuff like home and garden or real estate. Dining and nightlife, again, was very low for this. That makes total sense. So I think this is really valuable data. A few takeaways. So correlations with links, those have stayed pretty similar, suggesting maybe, like we talked about, the fact is links are getting discounted. Some links are getting discounted, not that links don't matter. Second thing, I think we need those more sophisticated on-page analysis tools. I think that is a gold mine waiting for somebody. As soon as I find an awesome one, I'll tweet it. And third, correlation is even more useful, more interesting, more applicable and actionable when we can apply it to smaller sets of results. at least as long as it stays statistically significant. So that, I think that's a huge opportunity as well. All right. So what can all this data tell us, right? These correlations, these experiments. Well, a few things. One, they can help us validate what Google says. They can verify theories about what we think is and is not in Google's algorithm. And they can lead us to better tactical approaches. So I am going to do all three of these with you folks today. First one. I know ever since I mentioned Donald Trump, nobody's jumping up and asking me questions. Don't worry, I won't slag on him anymore. I promise. I want to be respectful of all sorts of, I'm a very inclusive person, so I like to do all of that. So please do feel free to interrupt me. Do you guys remember seeing Google announce this, that HTTPS was a ranking signal, right? That secure sites get more, I saw it too. There's a bunch of good reasons to go HTTPS, to be secure if you're collecting information, right? If you're not just a sort of informational website, a lot of good reasons to do this. So Google giving a little bump to it, great, that's fine, I appreciate it. Except Moz did this. So we made the switch to HTTPS for the whole front end of our site, not the back end of our site, when you log in has been that way for years, but August 2013, that's kind of my baseline here. You can see traffic's growing. It grows about 25%-ish year over year, maybe a little more than that. And we get to March 2015. We are up about 56% over where we were a couple years before. And then we migrated. We migrated to HTTPS. Sorry, this is March. So we migrated in May, I think it was, May of this year. And look at that, right after we migrated, we saw a hit. And we saw a hit that looked almost exactly like when we moved from SEOmoz.org to Moz.com. In fact, it felt to us, to Cyrus and the SEO team at Moz, it felt to us like what was happening was exactly the same as what happened when we did a domain migration. Moving from HTTP to HTTPS had that same characteristics. We lost traffic for about 3 months, organic search traffic only, nothing else was affected. We got all our redirects in correctly. We submitted our XML site maps. We gave Google the heads up, all that kind of stuff. Everything was mapped one-to-one. None of the pages broke. It was a good migration. We did our homework. We did our diligence. And we saw pages fall out of, basically go from earning X amount of search traffic to, a little lower than X, and then they come back up again weeks later. And that full migration took about 3 months. So I think maybe it can be a good idea to move to HTTPS, but we were not feeling like there was much of a rankings boost coming from that move. And Google says it's a small rankings boost. Small could mean so infinitesimally small that you'll never feel it unless you're the New York Times. Or it could mean small, like 5%, right? Yeah, I'm going to tell you right now, this is my opinion, but it is not 5%. I don't even think it's 2%. It is tiny. This right here, you can't see because it's in the background, but URL is HTTPS. This is a correlation of very close to zero. Very close to zero correlation with higher rankings from HTTPS. So again, our correlation data suggesting that bump is pretty tiny. So Google is going to come out and say, if you're an SEO and you're recommending against going HTTPS, you're wrong, and you should feel bad. And I'm kind of a dick, right? So my reply, if you're Google and you aren't transparent about the time it takes to recover from an HTTPS migration, you should feel bad too. I'm totally cool. I'm cool with you saying you're wrong, but just be transparent. It doesn't take much to say, FYI, an HTTPS migration is a lot like a domain migration, so get ready. Frustrating. Here's Dave Naylor, one of the SEO world's foremost authorities. I felt bad when I moved to HTTPS and saw a 20% traffic loss. Yeah. Well, there you go. I think this is very, very similar to a lot of experiences that people have. And then, of course, like Google's like, oh, wait, can you give me an example of that? That shouldn't be happening. Shouldn't be happening. Man, happen to everybody. All right. Anyway, my advice here, just be aware. It's not that it's bad. It might be really smart and really good for you to move to a secure site for a million reasons. Security reasons, all that kind of stuff. But if you're like a restaurant website, should you take the hit? I don't know. If you're a pure blog and you have just content and a discuss, or a blog commenting system, should you take the hit? Maybe you shouldn't. It might not be worth it. Might not be worth it, and it might not do anything for your visitors that's more valuable. This was another one that was very frustrating. We're looking into this right now. So this was a statement from someone at Google who noted that if you use a 302 redirect, they don't you worry about it. They'll treat it like a 301 redirect, which bullshit. Like that is pretty terrible advice in my experience over the last 10 years and over the last 10 months, right? So one of the things that the Moz toolset does, which Screaming Frog and a bunch of other good ones do, is it crawls your site and then it looks at pages that might be broken or have issues on them. And when we see a 302 redirect, we tell folks like, hey, you might want to consider changing this to a 301, especially if it's been there a while and it's a permanent redirect. Well, guess what happens on average when people change 302s to 301s? Organic traffic goes way up. So I don't care if you treat it that way. I don't even know what could that possibly mean if a 301 still has this amazingly positive impact over a 302. So again, correlation data and experimentation can help us answer these questions about what does Google mean by that? What are they trying to describe there? And I don't mean to rag on these guys. I'm picking 2 examples from probably 100 things they've said over the last year that stood out to me as being wrong, right? Yeah, hey.
I'm a Democrat, so you didn't.
Oh, jeez. Wait, can you?
Yeah.
You can say it here. Oh, all right.
Yeah. I think Raleigh tends to be a little more blue, just so you know.
Okay, all right.
It's like the mountains. Just don't go to Asheville, or Asheville will probably be fine. But anyways,
I've heard amazing things about Asheville. Someone told me I have to go there.
It's beautiful.
All right. Well, you guys have to tell me later about all the places to go in NC.
Yeah. It's kind of like tin hatty a little bit, but it's possible that they're trying to throw us off, right? I mean, it's possible they're saying stuff like decoys. I mean, they would have no reason not to. I mean, they say don't be evil, but they're a little evil anyways. Like, I don't know. I mean, do you think?
So I'm gonna disagree with that one. I think in general, when they give public statements, they honestly believe that they are, John and Gary in particular, honestly believe they are representing what they believe to be best. But I think, that does not mean that there aren't aspects of the ranking systems that they either are not aware of or are not aware of how they impact things for every business. I think they would try to throw us off when it comes to links, right? And we saw Matt Cutts do that for many, many, many years, where he'd kind of be like, those kind of links are bad, don't get them. And then you'd see your competitors get them and they rank very well. Nowadays, and eventually they all most of them got penalized for it, right? And now we have a huge penalty recovery business that, I don't know, Moz is estimating, we think it's somewhere in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year that companies are paying for penalty recovery alone around the world. So, but yeah.
Do you think that's a rank brain thing? They don't know anymore?
Not necessarily. Maybe. So RankBrain, anyone not familiar with RankBrain? A couple of folks. So you can Google it. Bloomberg Business wrote a piece about, did an interview with Google, and someone from Google talked about this new machine learning architecture that they're implementing in about 15% of search queries that, essentially would suggest that maybe the Googlers themselves aren't feeding in the exact ranking factors anymore. A machine is learning what works best and what doesn't, and the algorithm is building the algorithm. So could be. I don't think that's the case. I think a lot so for years, do any of you have, I hope not, but do any of you have your blog or parts of your site on a subdomain? of your site, like blog.mydomain.com? See, because you're all you're all really good at SEO and trying to get really good at SEO. And like that subdomain issue, it's a pain, like it's a terrible thing because a lot of times it's your content management system. Like what's a good one? Volution or HubSpot a lot of times won't let you use a subfolder unless you're on a specific kind of system with them. So that happens a ton. And we've seen a bunch of examples where we moved content. We had our beginner's guide to SEO, which now ranks #1 for SEO guide, but it was on guides.moz.com for about a year and a half, 2 years. We moved it over to moz.com/guide/SEO guide, and the ranking went from #5 to #1 the next day, right? Because it had moved from the subdomain, which Google kind of considered to have these ranking signals, to the main domain, which Google considered to have these higher and more ranking signals. And you can see a bunch of examples of that. There was a great post on Medium from a startup that moved their blog over and were like, what the hell, I got all these new rankings and traffic and it's great. How come Google keeps saying subdomains don't matter? So I don't think it's rank brain. I think a lot of time it's just lack of them practicing SEO. Right? I wouldn't ascribe evil where I think it could just be inexperience. Yeah. Was there another question in the back? Yeah. Hey.
I work for a company that does marketing automation, so I was curious, is there any research that shows if you have it on the site and the subdomain, if it's a double penalty, or because I have a lot of clients that will put it in their marketing automation system so that it'll do its thing.
Right. And then later put it on the main domain?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it won't be a penalty. The worst that will happen is that Google will choose which one they think is the original or the best one to use. And sometimes that'll be the one in some domain, sometimes it'll be the one on the main domain. If you want to be safe about it, you can use one of two things. You can either 301 redirect once it gets to the main domain from the subdomain, or you can use the rel canonical tag. Both should work pretty nicely. Okay. I like the 301 a tiny bit better, but rel canonical should be fine for you if you want it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. All right, so let's talk real quick about raw URL mentions. This is a theory that like a ton of SEOs have had for years, that essentially if a raw URL, meaning unlinked URL showed up somewhere, so durhamdentalsurgeon.com is on a web page, right? Maybe the Durham Kiwanis Club lists it as a sponsor on their page, but they don't actually link. Like it just says the domain name, it doesn't link. Yeah, newspapers do this a lot, right? City halls do this sometimes, a lot of government institutions do it, all sorts of places. So we can actually quantify this. So Fresh Web Explorer crawls a few 30-ish million or so blogs and looks at the full content of those. So we can see if a URL gets mentioned in a blog post or in a feed or an RSS or XML or Atom feed of any kind. And we can do some analysis on that, which we did here. You can see mentions of a full domain name actually has close to the same correlations as links do. But let's keep this in mind. Correlation isn't causal necessarily, right? So it could be the case that lots of domains that get mentioned a lot on the web, especially on the fresh web, are places that are also well linked to. Like that wouldn't surprise any of us. I think that would make reasonable sense. So it's hard to disambiguate what is going on there. And therefore, we ran a test. We ran a test where we took, you can see here, all right, we basically took 20 volunteers. Thanks to any of you in the room who are part of the IMEC Labs volunteer crew. Really appreciate that. We took 20 volunteers, put URL mentions up on pages that they volunteered that were well indexed and crawled by Google. We waited for all of those to get indexed. We watched the rankings for the URLs and the domains that they had these mentions of, and we tried to see what's going to go on there. And here you can see the results of that test. It's not super clear, but basically, story is the URL mentions did nothing, had no impact. As soon as we changed those to live links, so we basically after a few weeks asked everybody to change their raw URL mentions to live links so we could see whether it was just that they were bad pages and Google didn't like them. Nope. As soon as we changed them to live links, those rankings went straight up. So that would seem to suggest that raw URL mentions, not a thing, probably not worth pursuing. Like if you get them, fine, right? If you're doing it because, hey, you want the brand mention and you want the brand awareness and you want it to support that organization anyway, fine. But if you get them, try to encourage those people to change them to live links. Like that will make a difference, apparently. Other cool thing about that experiment, it suggests that if something wasn't a link before and it gets changed to a link, it gets treated pretty much the same as if the page got a new link on it. So that's also useful, right? For folks in the SEO world who've been like, no, you need to get a new page linking to you. You can't just edit and update an old page with a link. Baloney. Those work. All right, social shares and links. So this has got to be one of my favorite. This is like some gray and black hat folks who thought they were having a fun time, and they were having a fun time. Like, let's be honest, this is hilarious. So this is refugeeks.com, right? And they search for, this is a search for their brand name. Look at this. Refugeeks.com is the world's best SEO website. Matt Cutts. I didn't even know he's still blogging. It's amazing. How did they do that? How did they get Matt Cutts to declare these sketchy-ish, gray hat-ish SEO, talented, but gray hat SEO guys to be the best in the world? Well, do you see here? A description for this result is not available because of this site's robots.txt. What's going on there? Well, what's going on is they found a page, a subfolder on Matt's blog that's blocked by robots.txt. Google is not allowed to crawl that subfolder. So since they can't crawl the subfolder, they can't see what content is actually on this page. Which means if you point a bunch of links at the page, Google is going to look at the links and be like, oh, that page must have a bunch of good stuff on it. In fact, that page must be saying that refugeeks.com is the world's best SEO website. And since Matt Cutts' domain is a very authoritative domain and very topically relevant to SEO, we should clearly rank it quite well. Kind of an awesome abuse of Google's system, but it points out two powerful things. Number one, Google respects robots.txt, but only from a crawl perspective, not from a keeping it out of Google perspective. If you have stuff on your sites, on your clients' websites, that you want not to be in Google, you can't use robots.txt. It can still show up. It can show up highly in the results if people are linking to it, and you can't control those links. Right? So you've got to let Google crawl and then use a meta robots no index tag. So let them crawl and then say, don't index this. Yeah. Oh yeah, so there you go. No index would be the way to keep this out. The other interesting thing about this is it shows the power of links and the power of domain authority. So we know this is going on, all right, we can see it, can overwhelm lots of other signals. So there's lots of elements. I actually did a Whiteboard Friday today about all these different elements that we have seen and know over the years that influence links, and I won't get into all of them, but loads and loads of things, right? Everything from where a link is on the page, to the authority, to the link age, to text versus image, yada, yada, yada. So tons of stuff that can influence a link. And that mattered a lot back in the day when we had to do manual link building. Right? When we were going out and going and getting links one by one by one. But a lot of folks in our field, a lot of them still do that, but a lot of folks in our field have switched to this new era of content marketing, right? Where they essentially try and build content, push it out to influencers, and then hope or nudge that those folks are going to link to that content. And that's how they earn those links. I will be honest, I promoted this. I promoted this a lot, that methodology. And we did a study this summer with a company called ignore this, BuzzSumo, not BuzzFeed. We did a study with BuzzSumo, which is a great tool for content marketing. Love those guys. And looked at 1 million pieces of content that had received social shares, and then looked at whether they also earned links. Is it the case that if I share socially, can I then earn links from that? which is something that a lot of us count on, well, man, that is the median number of links, referring linking domains, that a piece of shared content had. 1. That's pretty sad. In fact, the overwhelming majority of this content didn't rank well, didn't have links, did pretty terribly. This is the distribution, right? So this is the number of articles and how many links they had. Basically, a few articles had all the links, and the rest of them, nothing. Almost nothing. That is a power law distribution, really frustrating. 75% had zero external links. So getting shares does not mean, on average, that you're getting links. I think that this kind of made me reconsider, right? Because the reality of social amplification and earning links is that the correlations are just not there. These are, 0.021, 0.0065, just not there. I mean, that's not a consistent, inferable, direct influence. I wouldn't even be able to say whether social was causing those links or not when it does. We tried segmenting the samples. We did see a couple interesting things, like there's a little more of a correlation on the most heavily shared content, but even then, it's relatively small, frustrating. And that's why I think going forward, I can't really endorse either of these two statements, which have been SEO maxims for many folks for a long time. Number one, create good, unique content and Google will figure out the rest. No, they will not. They will not figure out the rest. You have to nudge people, like you have to earn those links. You have to earn that marketing. Google will not figure out the rest. This hasn't been true for a long time, still not true today. So big red X for you. Second one, best way to earn links is to create great content. Maybe in magical fairyland where I used to live until I saw the results of this study. But no more. I can't argue this either. You can't just create great content and tweet it and put it on Facebook and be like, all right, job's done. I'm good. Ready for the next one? Let's do it. That's not it, right? I presented a concept like this. Some of you may have seen me give this presentation or may have seen it on a Whiteboard Friday or seen me in a video talk about it, blog post. It's this concept of the flywheel, right? And the flywheel marketing is still a very powerful thing, right? The idea being it's very hard to start the crank going, really hard to get that flywheel moving at first. But then once you get it moving, it gets easier and easier to turn each revolution. That is still the case. But this, publish, amplify on social, grow the network, get some links, grow authority, rank for slightly more competitive terms, then earn search traffic and do it all over again. Well, you know what? That doesn't work because that doesn't just happen. You don't just get links from social sharing and then have a more powerful site that can rank for more and more stuff. That is not it just happens. There's only a few sites for whom it just happens. And I'm ashamed to say that Moz was one of them, and I was biased by my own experience. The fact that I and Moz can tweet something and put it on Facebook and then get links does not mean that the average site on the internet can. That's in fact what this data shows, that that's not true. So, social shares by themselves almost never, not just rarely, but almost never lead directly to the kinds of quantities of links that we need to do well for our sites and our client sites. Content that performs really well in social networks and ranks well in search engines, it might not actually be benefiting just from links. Another really interesting takeaway for this, right? Because we see content that has social shares but doesn't have links that does well in engines. My personal theory is that's engagement. What's happening there is Google is using Chrome and they're using Android and they are seeing where all of us go on the internet, and then they are looking and saying, we don't care that this got a lot of shares on Facebook, but we do care that a lot of people from Facebook and from all over the internet went and engaged with this piece of content. This appears to be very engaging content right now around this topic. That is kind of your aim, not just the raw social shares themselves. So all this data, you can find it all at bit.ly Ranking Factors 2015, and you can also find these slides there at bit.ly Rank Slides 2015. And with that, we can open it up to some Q&A or to some networking and beer drinking. And thank you guys again so much for having me. This is great. Cool. Hey, yeah, we got some questions over there. Shoot, yeah.
You were talking about the transfer your site to this user, I sort of feel like the same thing happened with mobile. It felt like
Yeah, mobile, totally.
your site wasn't mobile optimized, you were just going to fall off the thing, and I felt like actually Frank's worse, and I've seen other people in my industry that haven't mobile, and they're like still right up there with the results.
So the question for anyone who didn't hear was basically, when we talked about HTTPS early in the presentation, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. You introduced August. So August was saying that when she has seen similar things happen with a move to being mobile friendly, adaptive or responsive design, that kind of thing. We have observed that some sites, when they've gone responsive or adaptive, have lost traction with their users for whatever reason. They haven't seen as good engagement. Maybe they've seen better engagement on mobile, but worse engagement on desktop, and that can come from a lot of redesigns, right? If you don't think carefully about UX, or look, maybe you thought carefully about it, but it just turned out not to work well. The new design that you thought would be great is not that great. That happened to Moz this year. I'll be doing a case study about that later on the blog. But in those cases, I think when you see that loss of engagement data, and that is going to have a direct negative impact on Google. So I think a lot of the time when you make a change that you think is an improvement for SEO, if it hurts visitors, if it hurts traffic, if it hurts engagement, bounce rate, browse rate, right, the number of pages that people go through per visit, sharing and amplification rates, maybe people are getting to stuff but they're not sharing it as much as they used to. All those things have a second order effect on Google now. And so you can do the thing that Google says is right to do that may actually end up having a negative impact. Not universal, but may. So not surprising. And thanks for sharing that experience.
Hey guys, I wanted to mention real quick that we have Patrick running around with a Q&A mic.
Oh, great.
So that way the questions end up on YouTube as well. And so let me hand this over to the person that has a question real quick.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Looking at the opportunities here, what do you see as opportunities for agencies helping clients? I know you mentioned the penalty removal, sort of good and bad, but based on the changes, what do you see?
I see a bunch of things. I think that one thing that I've seen that's hugely popular is agencies either adopting or moving to a model that's very content marketing centric. And I don't necessarily believe that's a bad thing, but I think it's a bad thing if you ignore the fact that content itself or content plus social itself may not be enough, right? That it may not actually move the needle in the ways that your clients, or if you're an internal SEO, right, that your team, your business needs. So I would warn people against this idea of like, well, you know what, Google can figure everything out these days. They are real smart. It's not that they are not smart. They're smarter than they've ever been, for sure, absolutely. But getting content out there and getting shares is not enough. So I think that's a big opportunity. The other big one I see, anything around user experience, because the Google of today cares so much about user experience. They're using engagement data as, in RankBrain, for example, in a variety of ways. We don't know all of these ways. But I think helping folks with user experience and making sure, you're looking at the analytics and you're checking, hey, we put up this new page. How's the click-through rate? How's the browse rate? How's the bounce rate? How does it convert? Does it not convert? Like that is more critical than it's ever been, because it won't just predict, conversion rate and people moving through the funnel. It'll also predict how you rank over time. Yeah.
Hey, so I'm going to ask a question that's catering to the local business, because all these people here are marketing whizzes, and I work with businesses who don't even understand what SEO is.
Yeah.
And actually love them because they humble me every day. So my question is, what would you do for like a preschool or a local business that doesn't get SEO? What would you do given that what I've been telling them is do content marketing is all wrong?
So let me be clear. I do not mean it's all wrong. I just mean that for many folks, for the overwhelming majority of folks, it will not by itself be enough to move the needle on search. So here's how I think about this. What I tell small and medium-sized businesses and business owners and people who are just getting into web marketing is I really encourage them to find the sweet spot of 3 circles in a Venn diagram, right? So imagine I've got a Venn diagram here, like circle number 1, thing you are particularly passionate about, like that you love doing. Maybe they are great at events. Maybe they're great at giveaways. Maybe they're great at donations and sponsorships. Maybe they're fantastic at blogging. Maybe they are terrible at blogging, but they're great at making, visuals and slides. Maybe they're great at photography, at video. Any of those things, doesn't matter what it is. But if that needs to be one of those diagrams. And I find no one is ever like, well, I really hate blogging, but it turns out I'm great at it. That never happens. Well, almost never happens. You don't meet a small business owner and they're like, well, I really hate blogging, but it turns out I'm one of the better bloggers in the world. What? No. So I try and find people who are really passionate and at it and can be, because that means they can be great at it. The second Venn diagram is you can provide unique value in the field. Like all the value that could be gained from photography or events or sponsorship or blogging or whatever it is has not been taken up by the rest of your competition. Right? If you can find a way to add unique value, that's the second one. And then the third one is your audience actually cares about this and will engage with it. So whatever's at the intersection of those 3 things, that's what I often tell folks to go after and pursue. And in terms of how you can help a local small business, when it comes to search, one of the interesting things is that the ranking algorithm is totally different in local. I'm sure a bunch of you do local SEO, right, and work specifically with businesses that are trying to rank essentially in maps and in the new, I've been calling it the screw you Yelp box, but I don't actually know what it's called. You know what I'm talking about, the little box that took over in like the mobile and results. And it looks so ugly, like it looks so 1998 Google. But regardless, that algorithm is totally different. It's really based on a little bit on links, but citations, consistency of information across platforms. And so using a tool, obviously I'm partial to Moz Local, but you could use a Yext or some of the other providers in the field who get all that information standardized and then make sure all the providers have it. That can help a lot of those folks as well. Cool. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Ray.
Hey.
Hey, so we're in a very competitive niche, and we have clients come to us all the time that have had a lot of shady SEO done in the past. I talked to John Mueller. He's like, throw the links in the disavow, you're all good. I've talked to SEOs like Josh Bashinsky. He's like, I've polled like 30 SEOs, and not one of them has ever told me that the disavow file does anything. So do you have any experience, or does the disavow file actually do anything?
So yes, we do have some experience here. We've seen a lot of people get out of penalties and people who don't get out of penalties. Unfortunately, what I can't tell you is it always works consistently this way, because there is no it always works consistently this way. What I will say is you should definitely listen to John, not Josh, on the disavow file. Right. Josh, I think has a lot of interesting experience, and like he's done some cool stuff for Moz, but he's also inspired a lot of controversy and around disavow in particular. Right. Our experience has been that the disavow works well enough of the time that you should not ignore it. I think that's bad advice. The disavow file certainly can help preemptively, and we've seen it help in a ton of cleanups. Marie Haynes, who's at His Web Marketing, she writes about this stuff all the time. She does, probably a penalty cleanup a week, and she's got a lot of deep experience here. She has seen a ton of success with the disavow file, so I wouldn't ignore it. However, Google, they're picky bastards, right? Like they want you in many cases where they think you are not just the average, like, you paid an agency and you didn't know what they were up to. In a lot of those cases where they think you were more shady than that, they will ask you to be very proactive in trying to get the links removed, Sometimes you have to pay for people to remove them, and it's like this blackmail thing. And we've even seen Google kind of be like, hey, whatever, you built bad links. You know, you got to take your medicine now. I don't think that's cool at all, but I have seen Google act pretty hands-off in those situations. So depending on the severity, disavow may not be enough, but I would use it regardless. Cool.
Am I on?
Yeah, we got to.
So I wanted
Okay.
to end the Q&A real quick.
Oh, sure. And you guys are welcome to come grab me as well.
Well, yeah, we're gonna switch
I'll be
to the
around.
network.
I'll be around.